I think my dad's having an affair. The first thing I noticed was the cologne. Dad had always been an Old Spice kind of guy. The scent ingrained in my childhood memories like Mom's pot roast and the smell of freshly cut grass on Saturday mornings. Suddenly, there was this other smell. Something sharper, more modern. He'd walk past me in the hallway, a subtle cloud of it lingering, and it felt wrong, like a note out of tune in a familiar melody. It was late September, the leaves beginning their slow, colorful surrender to autumn. I was at their place for Sunday dinner, a ritual we'd maintained even after I'd moved out. Mom was bustling in the kitchen, humming along to some old Carole King album while Dad was fiddling with the thermostat, muttering about the changing weather. "You smell nice, Dad," I said, trying to sound casual. He stopped adjusting the thermostat and gave me a tight smile. "Oh, thanks. New stuff." Carol thought I needed an upgrade. Mom didn't look up from her chopping. Did I? I don't remember saying that. "You just bought it, David." The exchange was small, almost insignificant, but it planted a seed of unease in my mind. Dad had never been particularly interested in personal grooming. He showered, shaved, and slapped on some Old Spice. That was it. This new cologne felt like a deliberate effort, a performance of some kind. The next week, I noticed he was staying later at the office. He's a partner at a successful architecture firm, so long hours weren't unusual, especially when deadlines loomed. But these felt different. He'd come home looking energized, almost giddy. Mom would ask about his day, and he'd give vague, noncommittal answers. Busy, lots of meetings. One evening, I called their house around 7 p.m. Mom answered, her voice sounding tired. "Hey, Mom, how are you?" "Oh, just finished cleaning up from dinner. Your father's still at work." "Still? What's going on? Is there a big project?" He said something about a presentation he needs to finalize. Robert's staying late too, I think. Robert was his business partner. They'd been friends for decades. But then I remembered something. Earlier that day, I'd driven past Dad's office on my way to meet Mark. The parking lot had been practically empty. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I tossed and turned, replaying the cologne incident, the late nights, the empty parking lot. Mark, bless his heart, tried to reassure me. "Maybe you're just overthinking it, Sarah. He's probably just stressed out about work. You know how demanding that job can be." I know, I said, but I didn't believe it. This felt different. The following Tuesday, I was working from home when I realized I needed to drop off a contract at a client's office near Dad's firm. On a whim, I decided to swing by and see if he was free for a quick coffee. When I walked into the reception area, the receptionist, a friendly woman named Brenda, greeted me with a smile. "Hi, Sarah, what a surprise. David's in a meeting right now. You can wait if you want, but I'm not sure how long it will be." "Oh, that's okay," I said, trying to sound casual. "I just wanted to say hi. Maybe I'll catch him later." As I turned to leave, I saw a woman walk past the reception desk. She was younger than Mom, maybe early 40s, with long, dark hair and a confident air about her. I'd seen her once or twice at company picnics. Olivia, I think her name was. She caught my eye and gave me a polite nod. "Hi, Sarah." "Hi, Olivia." Then she disappeared into Dad's office. I paused. Brenda was back at her computer, typing away. "Who's Dad in a meeting with?" I asked, trying to sound like I was just making conversation. Brenda looked up, a flicker of hesitation in her eyes. "Oh, just Olivia. They're working on the Henderson project." The Henderson project. I remembered Dad mentioning it. It was a big one, a new high-rise downtown, but something about Brenda's tone felt off. Forced. I left, my mind racing. A meeting with Olivia, just the two of them. At 3:30 in the afternoon, I started paying closer attention to the credit card statements. Mom usually handled the bills, but I knew the online login. One evening, while they were out at a movie, I logged in. Most of the charges were the usual groceries, gas, utilities. Then I saw it. A charge for a restaurant called La Petite Brasserie. It was a small, upscale French restaurant in a town about 30 minutes away. A town Dad never went to. A town they never went to. I knew my parents' routine. They ate at the same handful of places, mostly casual, family-friendly spots. La Petite Brasserie was not their style. I told Mark about the credit card charge. He listened patiently, his brow furrowed. "Okay, that does sound a little suspicious," he admitted, "but it could still be innocent. Maybe he had a business lunch there." "Maybe," I said, but I didn't believe it. The next Saturday, Mom had plans to go to a craft fair with her friends. Dad said he was going to play golf with Robert. Around lunchtime, I found myself driving in the direction of La Petite Brasserie. I told myself I was just curious, that I needed to see it for myself. I parked across the street and watched. After about an hour, I saw Dad emerge from the restaurant. He was with Olivia. They were laughing, their faces close together. He put his hand on her back as they walked to her car. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. The air rushed out of my lungs and I couldn't breathe. My vision blurred and I gripped the steering wheel, trying to stay grounded. They weren't having a business lunch. This was something else. I drove home in a daze, tears streaming down my face. I couldn't believe it, my dad having an affair. It felt impossible, like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I didn't tell Mom. Not yet. I didn't know how. The thought of breaking her heart, of shattering her world, was unbearable. That night, I barely slept. I replayed the scene outside the restaurant over and over in my head. His hand on her back, their laughter, the way they looked at each other. The next morning, I decided I needed to confront him. I drove to their house and waited for him to come downstairs. "Dad, we need to talk," I said, my voice shaking. He looked at me, his expression wary. "What's wrong, Sarah? You look terrible." "I know about Olivia," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I saw you at La Petite Brasserie." His face paled. He didn't say anything for a long moment. "Sarah, he began, but I cut him off. "How could you do this to Mom?" I cried, tears welling up in my eyes. "How could you do this to us?" He looked away, shame etched on his face. "It just happened," he mumbled. "It wasn't supposed to." "What wasn't supposed to, Dad? What exactly wasn't supposed to happen?" He didn't answer. He just stood there, his head bowed, his shoulders slumped. "I'm going to tell Mom," I said, my voice cold. "She deserves to know." He looked up, his eyes pleading. "Please, Sarah, don't. I'll end it, I promise. Just give me a chance to fix things." "Fix things," I repeated, incredulous. "You've already broken everything." I turned and walked out of the house, leaving him standing there alone. Telling Mom was the hardest thing I've ever done. I went over there that afternoon after she came back from the craft fair. She was in the kitchen, unpacking her purchases, humming softly. I sat down at the table and took a deep breath. "Mom, I need to tell you something," I said, my voice trembling. She looked up, her eyes filled with concern. "What is it, honey? You look like you've seen a ghost." I told her everything. About the cologne, the late nights, the credit card charge, the restaurant, Olivia. I watched as her face crumpled, as the light in her eyes faded. She didn't say anything for a long time. She just sat there, staring blankly ahead, tears streaming down her cheeks. Finally, she whispered, "It's not true, it can't be." I reached across the table and took her hand. "I'm so sorry, Mom," I said. "I wish I didn't have to tell you this." She pulled her hand away and stood up. "I need to talk to him," she said, her voice shaking. Dad came home a few hours later. I stayed with Mom, sitting in silence as she waited for him. When he walked in the door, she didn't say a word. She just looked at him, her eyes filled with pain and betrayal. He knew that I'd told her. He looked at me, a mixture of anger and regret in his eyes. "Carol, I can explain," he said, his voice pleading. "Explain what, David?" She said, her voice barely a whisper. "Explain how you could lie to me. Explain how you could betray me after all these years." He tried to deny it at first, but Mom wouldn't let him. She repeated what I had seen, the credit card charges, and finally, defeated, he admitted it. The fight that followed was brutal. Shouting, accusations, tears. I wanted to leave, but Mom asked me to stay. I just sat there, a silent witness to the unraveling of my parents' marriage. That night, Mom slept in the guest room. The next morning, she told Dad she needed space. She packed a bag and went to stay with her sister. The house felt empty without her. Dad wandered around like a ghost, his face drawn and haggard. He tried to talk to me, to explain, to apologize, but I couldn't bring myself to forgive him. Not yet. A week later, Emily came home from college. She didn't know anything about what had happened. I had to tell her, to watch her face crumple with disbelief and pain. She was furious with Dad. She refused to speak to him. She spent most of her time with Mom, trying to comfort her. Mom came back to the house eventually, but things were different. The warmth, the laughter, the easy camaraderie that had always filled our home were gone. Replaced by a heavy silence, a palpable tension. They were like strangers, living under the same roof but worlds apart. One evening, I was sitting with Mom at the kitchen table. We were drinking tea, trying to pretend that everything was normal. "I don't know what to do, Sarah," she said, her voice tired. "I don't know if I can ever forgive him." "You don't have to," I said. "You deserve to be happy, Mom." She looked at me, her eyes filled with sadness. "I thought I was happy," she said. "I thought we had a good life." I reached across the table and took her hand. "I know," I said. "I thought so too." A month later, Mom filed for divorce. Dad moved out. The house felt even emptier now. The last time I saw them together was at a meeting with their lawyers. They sat on opposite sides of the table, their faces grim. They barely spoke to each other. The air was thick with bitterness and resentment. As I watched them, I realized that everything had changed. My family, my life, would never be the same. The idyllic picture I had always held in my mind had been shattered, replaced by a harsh, painful reality. I used to think I knew my family, but now I'm not sure I know anything at all.